and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of the comics documentary Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We have a very special show for everybody, and we're going to dive right into it because we recorded our live panel at the National Cartoonist Society Reuben Award weekend this past week at New Jersey. And we're really excited for it because it's about an hour panel talk that we had with Sarah Andersen of Sarah Scribbles, Cryptid Club, and Fangs, who we found to be just delightful and chock-a-block of cartooning knowledge.
Absolutely. And the outgoing NCS president, Jason Chatfield, whose work you've seen all over, including The New Yorker and the Australian comic strip Ginger Megs.
So without further ado, let us dive right into that live panel. So today we're going to have two wonderful people join us up on stage. Brad, do you want to tell who's going to join us first?
Oh, we're so excited. We're going to have Jason Chatfield, outgoing president of the NCS, who's done an amazing job during a very difficult time of the NCS. And then we're going to have the great Sarah Andersen from Sarah Scribbles joining us after that. We're very excited to have you too, Sarah. And we're going to get things started, and I think let's just bring Jason right up.
Yeah, Jason, by the way, a round of applause for all of his hard work making this year and the previous years happen. Yeah, have a seat. Yeah, the mic's not on there.
Hello,
So-
thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us, my friend. Let me ask you first, how does a cartoonist end up from Perth in New York? What's the journey there? How does one do that?
I took the wrong bus. I've been a cartoonist my whole life. I've never done anything else, really. I mean, with a short stint in printing and then doing cartoons at night after my day job. It was something I always wanted to do. I was lucky when I was a kid. I knew that this is what I wanted to do as a job.
Yeah.
And I say a job because there were no jobs in Perth. I didn't go to college. I went into cartooning, and I've been doing it. I'm 38. I've been doing it my whole life.
And found huge success in Australia. I think I can say that as someone from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is very little news travels to the U.S., but when you took over Ginger Megs, that was a big deal, right? I mean, for American audiences, describe for people what that meant for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was like taking over Peanuts. I mean, it was huge. It's like Ginger Megs is it's a 102-year-old legacy strip. Yeah, it's had four other artists before me. Started in 1921. It's like a little red-headed kid. He's like Australia's Dennis the Menace, but he predates him by about 60-odd years.
Yeah.
And then I took that over.
And then when and how did you decide, I'm going to start making the leap north? I'm going to start making a trip or sending some files to editors in New York, or was that what it was? It was
what it was. I came to America when I was like 9 years old, and I fell in love with it.
Yeah, wow. We're lovable. I mean, come on.
LA, I would say LA.
Yeah.
My mum and aunt took me to Disneyland. Me and my sister Disneyland. But there was something about the I don't know. It sounds trite, but opportunity. It's felt limitless. In Australia, there's very much a ceiling on what you can do.
Sure.
And that's partly due to just the small population, but also it is a cultural thing as well. They really don't put any emphasis or importance on art in their culture, and it's the first thing to get cut in every budget, including newspapers especially. But and I guess here it felt like there was more breadth for me to kind of try different things. So I used to come over every year. I'd save up all of my money, and I would come over every year. I'd come to the Reubens.
Wow.
And then I'd stay for a month. I'd do like open mics in New York, and I'd hang out in LA. I'd meet other cartoonists and just like ask them. It's the best education you can get, just asking other cartoonists, like, what do you do? What pen are you using? Like, what tablet? All that's what I did for years and years.
Yeah.
Until I eventually moved here 10 years ago.
Wow. And now, I mean, you've just come off of a 4-year stint running the whole works. And for this podcast goes out to professionals, pro-ams, amateurs. Would you describe for the world what the NCS is as you see it?
As I see it, the NCS is the one and only sort of consistent body of working cartoonists in the world that has kind of cultivated and recorded what this industry is over time. And I think going back to 1946 when it started, it was kind of, I don't want to say exclusionary, but it was exclusive.
Yeah.
And it did have... we've still got some pretty bad PR to undo on the sort of old boys front club, club front. But it does have it has good bones. The NCS was put together for a really good reason.
Yeah,
and those reasons are still a part of the bylaws and everything that sort of governs why the NCS is and what it does. It's a place for cartoonists to come together and share knowledge, to celebrate each other's work, to, like, in earnest, actually judge everyone's work every year in the different disciplines of cartooning, to kind of keep a record of who's working and who's doing well. And how your peers actually feel about that work. That's a really important thing that I didn't used to honestly think there was that much value in it. I thought awards were kind of silly and whatever, but over time I've realized just how valuable that record is. So that's the NCS.
Well, one thing that I've noticed, and in the short years that I've been coming to the Reubens, is this year especially, I felt so many of the seminars and talks were sort of a news you can use seminar. Very utilitarian, very like, you're great at what you do, how can you get better? How can you get better at business? How can you get better at art? How can you get better in your line work? How can you get better? And a lot of the conversations around that. And that I found invaluable. Didn't you, Brad? This is your first Reubens.
Because this is where you can really get into the weeds, right? This is where you really dig down deep.
Yep, get very esoteric and very,
Absolutely. Right. So now, Jason, you've been an NCS chairman, obviously, during a very difficult time, right? When we've talked about that before and rewriting the bylaws and so forth. Where do you see the NCS going next? What's the future of the NCS?
Well, not to preempt your next guest, but Sheena Wolf actually facilitated a phone call between, an introduction between me and Sarah Andersen a while back, and she was incredibly generous. We were on the phone for a long time, hours, a long time, and she was incredibly generous and candid in sort of sharing what would be of value to people once they actually got to the NCS. What would be of utility, like the seminars that we put together. What would people actually want to get out of being a part of an organization like this? And that dictated my sort of agenda for the NCS. People like Nick Selleck and Sarah Andersen. Scott Kurtz has been really helpful as well. He's setting up our new Discord channel, server. Just people who have been traditionally outside of the NCS looking in. It was really important to just get a really honest assessment of what that is. And so we have changed a lot of what the NCS has been doing to stop those people from being able to be part of this community. So I think that's where it goes forward, is taking on board. There's still a lot of work to do. And Karen is the perfect person Karen's the incoming president of the NCS. She is the exact person the NCS needs right now to carry forward the things we've started with sort of being able to be more inclusive and more encouraging and of more utility to cartoonists who don't work in traditional media. Right.
Well, that's probably the perfect transition to and please stay on stage to welcome our next guest up on the stage, Sarah Andersen of Sarah Scribbles, of Cryptid Club, and of Fangs. And Sarah, you might need to turn on that microphone there with apologies. Sarah, first of all, thank you for joining us. Congratulations on being awesome. That's a wonderful thing to be in life. This is our first time chatting with Sarah on the podcast, and so we have a million questions. But first of all, do you want to talk about that conversation with Jason? You guys can chime in what your thoughts were as a younger cartoonist, seeing what you saw and what you would like to see out of the NCS.
Yeah, I was so grateful for that conversation because I have always adored the NCS, but I think a lot of millennials and Gen Z didn't really know how to go about joining, and there were some roadblocks. And so I just love that you, as president, came in and came to us and asked us what we needed. And I think the cartooning world has changed so much with the advent of the internet and webcomics that the entire system for having this job can now take many different routes. And so we're now this like hybrid industry of cartoonists who all work in very different ways. And I think Jason was very cognizant of that and cognizant of how much this world is changing. And yeah, I really appreciated that call. It was great.
There was both sides. There was I know that there's a group of cartoonists who have sort of talked over time about just the industry at large and all kinds of things, but also just organizations and Comic Cons and expos and things like that it's invaluable stuff that everyone's just very honest about it. And it's kind of reminiscent of like the zine and underground comics with an X scene, the web comics, except they're much more encouraging of each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Less lone wolves.
I think all four of us have found this in our career, is that cartooning, less than it ever was, if at all anymore, is not a zero-sum game. Right. For me to succeed doesn't mean Sarah has to fail, and for Jason to succeed doesn't mean Brad has to fail. We can all share our best practices, and there is more than enough audience in the world, online and from the things that come from online, that I have barely scratched the potential audience I could hit. And with the friendship here and in cartooning in general in the NCS, we can share those best practices. One of the reasons why we do this podcast is to be able to say, hey, 22-year-old, learn from us. Like, if I can save you a year of trouble of going down the wrong path, how great. And I've seen both of you do that in your careers, is paying it forward and sending the ladder back down. And that's been a wonderful thing to see in the last couple of years with the NCS. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Very welcome. My pleasure.
So now here's a question that I always love asking. Sarah, what brought you to cartooning? What was your early, the first moment that you knew, this is something that is for me?
The honest answer is my father. You know, he was a huge comics person. And one thing that's amazing about him is he has this great sense of humor, too. So he was always kind of like sliding me Calvin and Hobbes and Gary Larson. And he was kind of training me young to like be funny without knowing it. And I had knowledge and passion about comics from a very early age, and from some of the classics. Like Gary Larson to me just still holds up as just, it holds up so well. That introduction and early childhood encouragement really led me down the path. And I was super into like Japanese comics when I was a teenager, and then I went to art school. So kind of like what you said, I've also always been doing comics. Like I haven't ever done anything else.
And you went to school at Maryland School of Design, right?
Maryland Institute College of Art.
I knew I was missing a word in there. So you went to school, and then you had a transition. You were a barista for a little while. When did you know that this was picking up? That this was something that was going to be a thing for you? When was that moment for you?
So the comic actually started becoming successful in terms of likes and follows in college, but because it was a web comic and it was, I believe, 2013, 2014, there was no way of monetizing it yet. Patreon didn't exist. I wasn't working with a publisher yet, which led me to my barista year. So I had enough success that I kind of knew I could maybe do something, because I was like, I have a pretty decent following. Like, this has to be able to turn into something. But at the time, there wasn't any sort of set system yet. Right. So I was like, just trying to find a way to make it work.
Yeah. We've said so many times that so many people that you might look at them at first blush and say, oh my gosh, overnight success, right? 2013, by my math, that's 10 years.
Liberal arts math, that works. I think a room of liberal arts majors. I think you're onto something there, Brad.
Yeah, that's amazing to me that you had that stick-to-itiveness and that it came out through that process. That's really amazing.
Well, one thing, and this is to your credit, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, is that so many people online can have a following of 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people, but they can't actualize their readership. You know, like you see their Patreon has $1 or their books don't move. What do you think? I think I have an answer for it, but what do you think your success has been in terms of taking this wonderfully passionate, loved audience and getting them into, there's now 4 collections of Sarah Scribbles, right? Into Cryptid Club, into Fangs. What's been your secret, do you think, to getting people to help support your career?
Good question. I mean, I think I have a genuine passion for what I do. So I think you touched on some of the social media stuff before, that I think I know deep down that like social media likes and follows is not like a perfect translation to success, and that you really have to have a love of what you do and reach your audience in a way that sort of speaks to their soul.
Yeah.
And it's exactly like what you were saying, like having millions of followers doesn't necessarily mean that your work has reached people in their hearts. And it's really about creating work that you feel genuinely passionate about. And I really care about my output. Like, there's a lot of relatable comics, and I think relatability is amazing, but I also try not to write specifically in order to get a bunch of likes. I try to write in a way that I feel creates something that might actually connect with people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the three of us were talking before you joined us this morning. Jason, Brad, and I were talking about how, having been a trained artist, you made such a great conscious choice to make Sarah Scribbles intentionally minimalist, and how powerful that could be. And, you know, MacLeod talks about that range of iconicity to realism, and how you are so much more relatable in your writing because of the iconicity. You mind talking about that for a second?
Yes, I'm working on a 5th book for Sarah Scribbles right now, and I'm writing essays for it. And I wrote a whole essay about simplicity. And I realized through writing that simplicity is truly an art form. You know, I had been at art school for 4 years. I was doing a lot of realism, and I had reached the point where I was a decent figure drawer. I was a decent renderer. And then when it came time to draw a comic, I was just atrocious. Like my early Sarah Scribbles, it's like I can see why people thought I didn't have any art background. I did have an art background, but I didn't have a background in simplicity yet. So I really learned that getting those lines right and those expressions and having a confident, steady hand, it is so hard. And it truly is an art form. And it took me, I think, I don't start, when I look back at my work, I don't start liking the line quality until around 2020. So that's about 10 years of cartooning until I found the confidence in my hand. So it's a misconception that because something is simple, that it's easy. It's all cartoonists in here, I'm sure you know, it's a challenge.
Yeah. Further to what we were saying is that it takes so much more discipline to not draw lines than to just fill it with McNally-esque hatching and things like that. You said that you adore the NCS for a long time. The people in the NCS talk behind your back in the best possible way about this exact thing, because people who work know how deliberate that choice is, and they notice. Yeah.
And if you want to see versatility, I got to tell you, you see Sarah Scribbles a lot. On Instagram is where I see you an awful lot. If you want to see versatility, check out your other book, which is called Fangs. It's about a vampire that falls in love with a werewolf. And by the way, you had me on panel 1. You want to talk? I love a good pun. That they meet at a place called the Auditorium, ODD Auditorium. And when I saw that on panel 1, I was like, "This is it. This is going to be the greatest thing." But the line work. Talk about the going from Sarah Scribbles to Fangs, and that completely different, not only writing style, but a different style of art as well.
Yeah, so actually the Auditorium is a real place. It's in Asheville, and I built the story kind of around this one little bar. Like I wrote a lot of it because it's this macabre goth bar.
Does it have the wall painting of Bela Lugosi?
No, I added that.
That was a very nice touch.
But yeah, shout out to the Auditorium. Yeah, so Fangs is, the style is a lot closer to what I was working on in art school. So I was really grateful to be able to have that background to pull from. And the sense of humor, it's a bit more macabre, and I would actually say Fangs is probably like closest to my soul because it has a bit of like darkness that doesn't necessarily come out in Sarah Scribbles, but I had always been like, I'd been a goth kid in art school. I'd always been like a little creeper. And then I had this idea, and it was a chance to bring out my background, basically.
Yeah. Well, Jason and I were talking beforehand, and maybe this question's better from Jason, I don't know, but we were talking about how how brave that kind of artistic choice is, because to have established yourself and to found a footing and found an audience that clearly resonates with us. Maybe you wanted to speak to this, Jason. I don't know.
You said it very well yourself. It's very brave. It takes courage to do that. A lot of people find a thing and then it hits and then they're scared to change it because they don't want to get outside of that, whatever's working.
Yeah.
But Sarah it's like a musician becoming a novelist and then becoming it's genuinely courageous, I think, artistically, to actually go all in on doing that.
Yeah, I mean, did editors come to you and be like, well, hold on, Sarah, maybe not the fangs? Was there a discussion about that at all, about how uniquely big a step away it was from Sarah Scribbles?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I expected it to completely flop. I was actually shocked. I believe Fangs is actually my bestseller compared to Sarah Scribbles.
Really?
So,
Really?
Yeah. But people don't associate it with me because they really associate it with me with the Sarah Scribbles style. So I loved the idea so much. And I really wanted to pursue it as an artistic challenge. So I believe I went to my publisher and kind of was like, and I'll do another Sarah Scribbles book, and I'm not leaving Sarah Scribbles, but I want to do this little number. Can you just let me do this? And they were supportive, and I basically expected it to just be like a side passion project. And it wasn't. It was the biggest success I've had so far, and that reaction has just meant so much to me.
Who was your editor on that?
Lucas Wetzel.
Lucas Wetzel, yeah.
Well, so here's my question.
Go ahead.
Because there's a page in the book. The vampire falls in love with a werewolf. She's deciding whether to date him. She's making in her sketchbook a pros and cons list. The left-hand page says, eat him. The right-hand page says, date him. Again, you had me, right?
It's
so
dark,
the question is, I've got to know, does that mean there's going to be a follow-up book to Fangs? Is there going to be more to the series? Where does this go next?
So for all of my series, I want to continue, but I want to continue in a different format. So for Fangs, I really wanted to adapt it for TV or live action, and I'm sure anyone in this room, or maybe you guys who have been through the TV/movie process, knows that it is damn near impossible. So I have a whole pilot, I have a Bible, I wrote the first episode, I pursued it for so long. So I think for all of my projects, Fangs, Cryptid Club, I would love to continue, but I think book form is not where I see that continuation.
Yeah.
But yes, somebody let me make a show.
That's exciting, yeah.
There's a guy in the back. Oh, sold, all right. To the lady on stage, a new show, but coming this fall. But even the choice of doing that cloth wrap with the black embossing on that cover is not a choice that a lot of marketing would make anymore, and because it's a very Victorian feel, so perfect for the style of the book. Did you at all have to get any pushback on that as well, or were they all in on the book cover design as well?
I was really lucky that my editor, Lucas Wetzel, was very supportive of it, and he was actually the one that decided on the black page tint that makes the page edges look black. So I think he also had an enthusiasm for it that I was really grateful for.
And your inner 15 goth was great. Oh yeah, great, black pages, this is great.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
So going back to your third project, Cryptid Club, which again has this very sense of the macabre, the sense of mythological creatures. So again, I'm sorry, I'm giving all your best punchlines away, but if you allow me to fanboy just one last time, because Dave knows this, when you see a joke that you're like, why didn't I think of that? there was a kraken saying, "Release the kraken." And the scene widens out, and there's a larger kraken saying, "Benjamin, you're still on timeout." And I'm like, that's brilliant. How come I can't do that? So talk about Cryptid Club and your clearly your love of Halloween, macabre, goth. Talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, so I had been wanting to do something with cryptids for years because I love cryptids. Like it's also like a childhood love of mine. And I was just like, how do I do this? Like, do I write a children's book about Mothman? Like, how? And then one day I was like, oh, just write a comic series about all of them. Put them all together. And yeah, it was actually, I think that was the easiest project I've ever done because I didn't necessarily have to create characters. I just took what existed in the lore, in the culture, and sort of fine-tuned it a bit to my sense of humor. So it was basically like just taking all these pre-existing characters and being like, what if, and then just writing.
It's great that there's one cryptid that you taught me about in that book. It was the walkers, the Cleveland walkers, or the what are those?
The Fresno night crawlers.
The Fresno night crawlers. It's the most like Fresno type thing. Oh yeah, the crawlers. Anyway, it's great. I loved it. But so now I want to switch gears in terms of asking about your process.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought, as you're now going into the second decade of your career, bringing in assistants, expanding the studio, that kind of thing? I mean, do you have plans for that kind of thing as the years go on?
So my drawing process is so simple and my writing process is so simple that I think I couldn't have an assistant even if I wanted to, because I just sketch and then bring it to the Cintiq. I don't think I need an assistant because I have agents that do like the contract stuff and some email stuff, but I don't know. I'm a pretty straightforward person, and I don't know that an assistant would have that much to do.
Well, let's talk process. What's your average day like in terms of your drawing?
So I have like writing days and drawing days, and I keep them kind of separate. Okay. And writing days, I cannot work without coffee. Like I'm such a caffeine fiend, and something about like having a cup of coffee and a sketchbook just works for me. And I keep my sketchbooks super messy. I know many cartoonists that have these beautiful sketchbooks and they're dated and they're organized. I just can't do that. I need the messiness. I need to kind of not be thinking about how things look to get the idea to kind of come out. And then the drawing process is also pretty straightforward. I work on a Cintiq and I'll take the sketch. Sometimes I'll photograph it or sometimes I'll just freehand it. And that takes about like three hours or so. So
the writing is the bulk of the process by far.
Yeah, that can take me all day, sometimes multiple days to come up with an idea that I feel comfortable with.
I actually want to turn it to you, Jason, because you were nodding very vociferously to that.
You can tell that she spends a lot of time on the writing.
But I'm curious, what is, just out of curiosity, what is your process? What's your average day?
This is going to sound very silly, but for 16 years, I've been doing a daily and Sunday strip. And the looming deadline. Anyone who's done that knows that looming cloud of that deadline.
Yeah.
You have to build in rituals to kind of game your mind into that. And the coffee and the sketchbook and all that stuff is this is going to sound very silly. Scotch Bath Sunday.
Scotch Bath Sunday? I think we'd all like to learn more about this.
And we're all leaning in
I accidentally discovered that I'm really good at writing stuff when I'm in the bath on a Sunday with a sketchbook. And one day my wife brought in a glass of scotch like I was Dalton Trumbo or something. And there was just some kind of magical whatever, and it was replicable, and so I just did that.
Oh my
This
gosh.
is the most Hunter S. Thompson strategy for writing. I bring my shotgun and my whiskey into the hot tub, and that's what I do.
Cocaine.
Exactly. I do 3 bumps of cocaine, and I'm off for a Sunday. There we go.
I thought for sure Scotch Bath Sunday was some kind of Australian euphemism, but it's just a scotch in a bath on Sunday.
There is one Australian saying that I taught Nick, I think, this week, which is when someone gets a little too arrogant and full of themselves, you say, oh, he drinks his own bath water. That is adjacent.
You guys have the funniest sayings.
So now we've been pulling a few people aside all weekend and asking them this question, and I really love this question. And I want to ask each of you, starting with Sarah, and that is this: as professional creators, There are times that you have to create even though you don't feel creative, right? You've got to make lightning happen. And even though there might not be anything up here, if you're like me, there's nothing up here. But you got to make it happen. What do you do to make creativity happen when it just isn't happening?
And Sarah, ideally, if you could have an answer that doesn't involve scotch, that would be ideal for the younger listeners. We can edit out a separate version if it doesn't include Jason's answer. No kidding. Go ahead.
So when I was younger and I would get this question, I would tell people to just work through it. Like I would tell them to work through the art blocks. Don't do that. You will burn yourself out.
Yes.
My answer to that is rest. And I know I'm sort of privileged to be able to say that because I can give myself breaks, but that is the thing that works. Is we're not automatons. We need to recharge, and I think that's where a lot of art blocks come from, is being overwhelmed and stressed. So rest, and then get some coffee and try again.
I'm exactly the same. That's the exact same advice I would give to any cartoonist. Is it's tempting to just load your schedule and just bury yourself in work.
Yeah.
And it makes sense when you're young to do that, to think that's how you do it. It's counterintuitive. There's 2 books that I would highly recommend. One of them is Drawing from Within by Nick Meglin and his daughter, Diane. And the other one is by Alex Sujun Kim Pang, and it's called Rest. And it is exactly to that point that we're not designed to just go all the time. It's like a cyclical thing. You do need to unwind and rest in order to actually be creative and productive.
It's very much like farming in the sense that you cannot farm eternally.
Yeah.
You have to let the field go fallow sometimes and recharge it. Yeah,
and go out and do something that makes you feel creative, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's taking a walk or seeing friends. There's something I liked about your answer, and that is that you kind of said, hey, it's okay to not feel it at that moment. And you need to take some time for self-care. There's so much of Sarah Scribbles that says it's okay to have a little anxiety. It's okay to feel insecure. I could imagine that your work reaches out and touches people in such a way that you get some really profound comments and responses from your readers. What's that like?
I mean, it's all I could ask for, and it's what my aim with the comic is to help people feel normal and to feel seen. I think there's so much relatable content out there now, which is great. But back when I started in 2011, I think we were still fooling ourselves with this like perfect veneer on social media. And I wanted to offer a counter perspective to that. So when people validate that and tell me that I have helped make them feel better, that's all I want. And it's incredible. It's truly incredible. I'm very lucky.
Well, somewhat related to that question in terms of the joy and the satisfaction, in both of your processes, the writing, the penciling, the inking, the coloring, the final submission of the file, getting comments back, what is the single highest point for you in your process? Is it pens down? Is it when the spark comes and you got to race to a notebook? Is it when you finally see it on a screen or a page? Is it what? Why don't you jump in first, Jason?
Sure. It's the doing. I lose time. I get in the zone and I just lose time. Yeah. And then I look up and it's like 5 p.m. And when I put my head down, it was noon. Yeah. Bill Plimpton talked about this recently, how he gets up and he sits at his drawing board and he will, with great pleasure, draw for 12 hours at a time sometimes. Yeah. And he takes such joy in the doing of it that the product at the end is just gravy. It's the doing that is the joyful bit. And that's the advice I give to people when they ask, like advice on being a cartoonist is, well, don't do it for the adulation and praise or the, whatever fame you think fame and success is. Do it for the doing it and the process, and become a sort of not a slave, but like a fan of process of that. And I think if you're really invested in the doing and challenging yourself and getting better at it, trying different tools and different processes and stuff like that. I'm a real process junkie. That's all I ever talk about to other cartoonists. But I think that is a good reason to do it. And to Sarah's point, when you get the feedback, it's really nice when you connect with people. But the reaction, if it's a bad reaction or a good reaction, the reaction doesn't belong to you. I mean, you did the work and you put it out. The reaction, it's lovely when it's nice. It's really good when you connect.
You said that earlier this week, and the reaction doesn't belong to you.
Yes.
And I think I've heard that somewhere in my life before, but I really resonated with that because we've all faced trolls and haters online, as big and as small as they can be.
Yeah.
But the idea that you can't control their reaction is a really powerful one for us all to kind of internalize and think about.
Yeah, I think I don't want to claim that I made. I think I heard that somewhere. That's not me.
Oh no, I'm not saying it, but I'm just saying thank you for passing it along.
No, sure.
You know,
I think the only one that I ever wrote myself and enjoyed, sort of how it sounded. Is don't curate your art to what gets likes, curate it to what you like. Because then you'll just find your people.
Yeah.
They'll just find you.
Yeah. No, it's true, and this actually goes to the success any of us have found online. Is it's odd that the closer we write to our heart, not at all thinking about what people are going to react to, that's oddly what resonates. You know, you're like, well, no one's going to like this weird 18th century joke that I'm making about yarn. Right. Holy hell, the world loved that joke. I never would have thought about that. You know, but anyway, I don't want to step on your chance to make that answer for the earlier one about your favorite part of the process: the writing, the drawing, the inking, the coloring, the final product. What for you is the joy-filled moment?
Yeah, so the cartoonist Sam Gross, who was in memoriam on the screen last night and was truly one of my favorites, he had this quote that said something along the lines of, sometimes you have an idea and it just glows. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. Like sometimes when I'm just in the pits writing in my sketchbook and I'm like fighting with my own brain to come up with an idea, something will appear and something inside of me knows that I just hit the nail on the head with that one. And it's pretty rare. Normally I'm like, the night before I have to post, I'm looking at like 10 different ones and I'm like, oh, I think this one's funnier than this one. But sometimes I'll get an idea and I'm like, I know this is just right. And that is the best feeling in the world. And I feel like I'm constantly chasing it because it isn't like that happens every day or even every week. Yeah.
No, it is the drug we chase. Is that the joy, that serotonin hit of having that spark hit. Yeah.
Is there one that you really fought for, like that you really stuck with, that sticks with you?
I think a recent one was, it was like when I was younger, I wanted to be a pilot or the president, and now as an adult, there's just two panels where I'm like looking at a plant and I'm like, I want to grow a basil plant. It's like about how my goals have shifted.
I love that. That's great.
Oh my God, I can relate to that because during the pandemic, I'm like, I'm going to grow tomatoes. Well, not very well, apparently.
No,
that's my role in the pandemic, is to grow shitty tomatoes and give them to my neighbors.
So here's a question. I've talked to a lot of people about their creative process and everything, and it always amazes me. My sketchbook is actually filled with a lot of words, a lot of written stuff, and then just some very light sketches, because a lot of the visual stuff is happening up here, but the word stuff I got to keep straight, right?
Oh yeah. And sometimes the key word is super critical.
Right.
Yeah.
And then some people, it's all drawing. In fact, I heard somebody at one of these panels, they say, if you want to beat writer's block, just start drawing. Put a pencil to paper, and was it you? Yeah, it was somebody. It was somebody smart. And they said...
So you don't look at Jason.
Don't look at me.
They go, the first drawing's going to be terrible, the second drawing's going to be terrible, all the way to the 10th, but you can't get to the 10th drawing without starting with the first drawing. You got to do that first terrible one to get to the 10th one. If I were to look in either one of your sketchbooks, would I see more illustrations or more words?
You would see more illustrations, but they would be at the level of a stick figure. I do write, though. Sometimes I will literally write the sentence of what I want to write about. Yeah. I will write about, and then have like a little list. So.
And now, I think I heard somewhere, you work on lined paper, right? You're not precious about your sketchbook. It's lined paper, and you're not like...
Oh my gosh, do you really?
Yes.
There's something sort of sweet about that. Like, just like the kid in you is still like, nope, lined paper, that's all I need.
What's the philosophy behind that?
I think you said it needs to be as unprecious as possible, because I'll get all crazy about how things need to look perfect, and I'll forget about writing the idea. So my sketchbooks are truly like...
Can I ask you guys, have you ever been gifted a beautiful sketchbook, leather bound, and you're like, I can't draw on this damn thing. This is too pretty. This paper's nice, but the back of the phone bill, I'm drawing on that thing all day long. But the damn sketchbook, like, there's not a single sketch in that thing. I mean, are you the same way?
Absolutely. You know, do you know how many, even ones that I bought for me, that are
like empty. You paid the money for it.
paid the money and I don't want to draw in it because it's nice. It's too nice for my crap. So and it is full of like the other ones. I work on yellow legal pad in the bath because I don't want anyone to ever. Because I want to be able to scrunch them up. It feels nice to scrunch up with yellow legal pad, and I just want to throw it up.
That's such a satisfying throw. That the scrunch paper across the room.
If I were to look into your sketchbooks, more illustrations, more words.
It's a mix of both, but they're nothing to do with each other often. Some of them are just to get away from an idea and come back to it later, just to get my brain focused on something else. There are two things that changed my brain on that. One was seeing Richard Thompson's exhibition at the Billy Island. The sketch, like the pencils versus the cul-de-sac finishes. And also Pat Oliphant, his rough pencils. He didn't lightbox, he didn't trace. He had a sketchbook, and he kind of figured out the puzzle. And then he went and did a separate. He didn't no lightbox, nothing. He went over and did it.
Wow!
And I remember just seeing. It's like you can see the image and the idea and everything and what he was figuring out, but then there's so much unwritten that was just up here, a shorthand that he had with himself.
Wow,
that changed my whole brain with that process.
That's. I mean, the thing about sketchbooks that blew my mind, because I'm like both of you. It's very dashed off and unimportant to me as part of the process. Like at the end, I literally throw it across the room. But then at one point in my career, I heard that Robert Crumb traded 3 or 4 of his sketchbooks for a house in France. And I was like, I am doing this wrong, damn it. I did not know that was an option, that we could get a house in France. We traded our sketchbooks. Damn it.
I did not know the currency of France was sketchbooks.
The whole house is yours. Yeah, that's fine. You know what? You take it. That's great. But like, as soon as I found that out, I was like, what the? No one told me that was an option as a cartoonist. Keep your sketchbooks traded for a house?
Would they accept scrunched up bits of yellow paper?
That's like half dipped in scotch and bath water. Like you can get like a 1-bedroom in Perth for that. That'll be great.
Studios.
So now I know you're going to the Baltimore Comic Convention next, right? And then after that, it's the Mothman Festival, right? Are you? What's that? Have you been to that before? Is this a first time? Tell us a little bit about the Mothman Festival.
Yeah, my first time. I really wanted to go when Cryptid Club first came out, and we just couldn't make it happen. But I was determined. So now, 2 years after the book has been out, I'm going.
Yeah.
And it's such a crazy, unique thing, like a whole festival around the Mothman.
Right.
I really don't know what it's going to be like. I don't know if it will have anything in common with like my normal Comic-Con experience, but I'm just thrilled.
Do you think there's no convention for the Fresno Walkers because it would be in Fresno? I mean, is that part of the problem why the Fresno Walkers, they're like, we're not holding anything?
There might be, and maybe Chuck, you can help me out with this, because this is a Philadelphia adjacent thing. But the movie The Blob, when there's that scene where they're running out of the theater, do you know the city that's in? Yes. They recreate that scene every year and have a Blob Fest every year.
Wow.
Where they recreate running out of that movie theater.
So, gang, not a lot to do in Philadelphia. Not a lot going on. Hey, what if we recreated the scene from The Blob, everyone? Anybody doing anything this weekend? Who's got Jell-O? Anybody? Come on, let's do it.
Did you say Collegeville, Chuck? Collegeville.
We're good at naming things in Philadelphia.
Now go ahead, Chuck. Deliver the punchline. What's in Collegeville? That's right. There's a college there.
It just sounded like a really lame Facebook game.
So, Jason, personal appearances, conventions. What do you got coming up?
I do San Diego Comic-Con. I'm doing New York Comic-Con in October. I'm doing CXC in Comics. One of the best. I go all the time and I love it.
Yeah.
It's one of the best things. I discover artists that I've never seen before. They have tabling there, and they have great seminars, and they have the Billy Island Cartoon Museum and Library.
Yeah.
It's like Mecca for cartoonists. It's amazing. So I'm really looking forward to CXC this year. I'm speaking this year. It's going to be fun.
Well, let me ask you maybe one final question for me anyway, is that we've all been nominated for different awards in our lives, and that's lovely, and the accolades are lovely, but Brad and I often talk about that one of the best awards in cartooning is getting one more year to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that in itself.
You get to do this for a living.
Yeah, of all the millions of people in the world that we get to do this, and what a gift that is. But in a more aspirational tone for both of you, what Over the coming decades, you're both young cartoonists. What would you like to do that maybe you haven't done yet in cartooning?
For me, it's not so much cartooning. I would love to expand into different modes of writing. Like, I love podcasts, actually. I listen to you guys while I'm working, but I love, like, stuff you should know. I'm a big researcher, and I was actually, my minor in college was nonfiction writing. So I would love to, like, anything where I can research and then talk about it. For some reason, that's just my jam. But it's really hard to go on tracks that are that different. Like, I've been very much in comics for a while, but basically, like, to sum it up, just nonfiction writing, a bit more of that somehow.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. Jason? Follow that one, Jason.
Yeah, I got nothing. I got nothing.
More scotch.
Jason's like, I just want a bigger scotch. 3 fingers this Sunday? I don't know.
Yet? No, I guess it sounds sad, but I'm framing it as an opportunity. My time doing Ginger Megs has now come to an end. I got my last paycheck last night.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So it is. It's been 16 years. It's been my full-time thing for 16 years, and I had to draw.
Congratulations, my
Thank
friend.
you, thank you. And again, getting to do it
absolutely.
one more year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. You're right. Getting to do it one more year was always that was a gift, and it was a privilege to do that job. But drawing in someone else's style was a real challenge for me.
Yeah.
I had to ape someone else's style for my whole career, which is a challenge. And now I'm actually getting to do my own stuff in my own style on Substack, and I'm really enjoying it. And I'm writing more. I'm a big fan. Like, I never thought of myself as a writer. Cartoonists write, obviously, but I'd never thought of myself as a writer. But it's a really hard thing to do well, and I love good writing. I love David Sedaris and Hunter Thompson and just good craftspeople of writing, and I really want to get better at that, and then be able to illustrate my own writing and other people's. Like, there's a thing I do on Substack called Your Shout, where people send me in their New York, like, stories, just weird little things that happen to them, and I illustrate them, and I love it. It's really
delightful.
fun.
That's so.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with that.
I don't know that I've ever asked you. What do you want to do in your decades to come in your cartooning?
You know what? This was all like you. This has always been, and I think like you, from what I'm hearing, this has always been my one thing. This has been, I never wanted to be a firefighter or a doctor or a superhero. I just wanted to be a cartoonist. The fact that I'm doing this, we were going to the award dinner tonight, and my wife pulled me aside, and she said, if 2000 Brad Geiger could see this, he'd be amazed,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that came out of nowhere. I just want to keep doing this. One more year, and then after that, one more year, and then after that, one more year.
Yeah.
And then someday come here and...
Now you got me choked up, you son of a bitch.
I'm not an emotional...
I just want to draw.
I'm not an emotional
I want my friend Brad to draw.
I don't know if you guys even mentioned this at the top of the show, but not only did were you nominees last night?
Yeah, both of us, yeah.
Both of you were nominated. You actually, and Sarah, you all presented last night.
Yeah, which was delightful. Thank you for letting us do that.
No, thank you for doing it. It was something that I think is really important to have you guys do that, because kind of teasing some things that we have planned for the NCS. I guess the category newspaper comic strip, we got to get rid of the word newspaper out of there. Comic strip. It's comics strips, and online short form and online long form. They were created for good reasons and to be inclusive, but now they kind of delineate the work in a different way, and I think they just need to be considered within all the other categories.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, since no one asked, I also wanted to say the thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
Since no one asked.
Here's your chance to cry in front of people.
So, in my life, I've gotten to do comic strips. I've gotten to do long form sci-fi, which is delightful. I'm in love. I got to do briefly in my early career political cartoons at the San Diego Union Tribune. The thing I want to do now, and it's so stupid, at some point in my career, before Disney closes up their print operation, I want to do a backup story in Marvel.
Oh, really?
With Paste Pot Pete, the villain, Paste Pot Pete. It's the dumbest character that Stan Lee ever created. His name is Paste Pot Pete, and he shoots paste. It is the dumbest villain. It's like, okay, I got a great idea for you, Jack. His name is Paste Pot Pete, and he shoots paste. I'm done for today. Fantastic. I've been Stan Lee. Like, it is the dumbest character.
Yeah.
And I want to write a backup story for Marvel with Paste Pot Pete. It's
And now I want to see it happen. Now I want to see it happen.
Like a West Coast Avengers or whatever, what was it? Great Lakes Avengers. I want to do that kind of style of stupid Marvel. I think that before Disney closes it up, I want to do that, and that's my one last goal.
I believe in you.
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah.
So I grew up in the Midwest, in a small town in Michigan called Bad Axe, very small town in the thumb of Michigan. And this is starting to feel very familiar because sometimes when you're sitting with a friend who's a new friend or an old friend, and the night's getting late and you just want it to keep going, and you one more thing, until finally, and if this is a Midwest thing, you know it happens, somebody goes, well, and when you see the knee slap and you hear, well, you know it's about that time.
The coffees go down on the center table. Well, it's been a pleasure visiting. I don't know why I went south there. That was weird. The adjustment of the pants. No, I want to give a huge thank you to both Jason and Sarah for their time, their insight, and their talent over the years that you've both shared. Thank you for this time. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for this.
Thank you so
Good
much.
night, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, buddy. Travel safe home.
With a huge shout out and a thank you to Jason and Sarah both for being such amazing guests and for sharing your time, your knowledge, and your kindness with us and with the audience. We thank you so much for being on the show. And that just means that it's time for me to say that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
And if you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode like this one. We got a great review, Dave. I got to share it with you. Been listening to these guys for years now and had to leave a review. The show covers topics. They go in depth from the creation side, the business side, as well as answering questions from listeners, which I've personally found incredibly valuable. It's my favorite podcast, and their advice has helped me a great deal over the past few years. I'd recommend it to anyone who takes their art seriously and wants to get some insight from some experts in the field and have some laughs. That came in from our listener, Tail Pockets.
Tail Pockets, thank you for the kind words. That genuinely warms our heart, and we appreciate it so much. And I will say Comic Lab is made possible by your support over at patreon.com/Comic Lab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/Comic Lab.
I want to know whether your brain works like mine. When Jason said Scotch Bath Sundae, what's the first image that came into your mind?
Okay, honestly, a Scottish man in a bathtub.
I immediately thought of an ice cream with butterscotch syrup all the way, like a moat, all the way around it instead of on top of it. So it would be a Scotch Bath Sundae.
What I think what this shows is that both of us are terrible at the English language.
And both of us need a good glass of Lafroig at the end of the night.
I think we could both use a Scotch Bath Sundae is what this is
That's
telling
right.
us.
That's right.